Hello, and welcome to another Read With Me session. I'm yours truly, Isabel Bedell, and I'm here to read with you another amazing book. It is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, and really excited for this one. I believe it's going to be one of those books that not only do we read very fast because it's only like 235 pages, but I feel like there's some really good stories in there that's going to connect so many of the limiting beliefs that we may have, that we might have built up when we were younger, or whatever it is that we have around money. I feel like this book is going to help anybody that's listening in, but also myself, to get over those things. We all of us grow up in a particular way. Everybody's different, but I'm sure that everybody has some form of limiting belief that they've inherited from their childhood, from their parents, from their grandparents, whatever it is. And most of the time it comes around money, because if you didn't know, over 89% of divorces come from money. Can you believe that? It's not lack of communication. It's not lack of this, lack of that. It's literally because of money. And money being either there's too much or there's too little, right? Or that becomes an obsession for some people. They connect having money to their being or their essence, or what it is that they're supposed to be valued from, when money is just a tool, right? And to be used wisely. So I'm really excited to dive into this, because I have a lot of questions, and I feel like maybe all the answers lie within this book. So get yourself a drink, have some water, have some wine, have some tea, whatever it is that you fancy. And let's dive right into this amazing book. Okay. It starts off with a quote by Napoleon and another quote by Sherlock Holmes. The quote by Napoleon is, "A genius is the man or woman who can do the average thing when everyone else around him is losing their mind." Sherlock Holmes also states, "The world is full of obvious things which nobody, by any chance, ever observes." That's awesome. So we're going to read the introduction, and we're also going to be going into chapter 1 for this particular Read With Me session, because these chapters are quite short. So super excited about that. Let's dive right into it. Introduction. The greatest show on earth. I spent my college years working as a valet at a nice hotel in Los Angeles. One frequent guest was a technology executive. He was a genius, having designed a patented a key component in Wi-Fi routers in his 20s. He started and sold several companies. He was wildly successful. He also had a relationship with money I'd describe as a mix of insecurity and childish stupidity. I carried a stack of 100 bills several inches thick. He carried a stack of $100 bills several inches thick. He showed it to everyone who wanted to see it, and many didn't. He bragged openly and loudly about his wealth, often while drunk, and always apropos of nothing. One day he handed one of my colleagues several $1,000s of cash and said, "Go to the jewelry store down the street and get me a few $1,000 gold chains." An hour later, gold chains in his hand, the tech executive and his buddies gathered around by a dock overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Then they proceeded to throw the coins into the sea, skipping them like rocks, cackling as they argued whose went furthest, just for fun. Days later, he shattered a lamp in the hotel's restaurant. A manager told him it was a $500 lamp and he'd have to replace it. "You want $500? The executive asked incredulously. "You want $500? The executive asked incredulously while pulling a brick of cash from his pocket and handing it to the manager. Here's $5,000. Now get out of my face and don't ever insult me like that again. You may wonder how long this behavior could last, and the answer was not long. I learned years later that he went broke. The premise of this book is that doing well with money has a little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. And behavior is hard to teach, even to really smart people. A genius who loses control of their emotions can be a financial disaster. The opposite is also true. Ordinary folks with no financial education can be wealthy if they have a handful of behavioral skills that have nothing to do with the formal measures of intelligence. My favorite Wikipedia entry begins, Ronald James Reed was an American philanthropist, investor, janitor, and gas station attendant. Ronald Reed was born in rural Vermont. He was the first person in his family to graduate high school, made all the more impressive by the fact that he hitchhiked to campus each day. For those who knew Ronald Reed, there wasn't much else worth mentioning. His life was about as low-key as they come. Reed fixed cars at a gas station for 25 years and swept floors at JCPenney for 17 years. He bought a two-bedroom house for $12,000 at the age of 38 and lived there for the rest of his life. He was widowed at 50 and never remarried. A friend recalled that his main hobby was chopping firewood. Reed died in 2014 at the age of 92, which is when the humble rural janitor made international headlines. 2,813,503 Americans died in 2014. Fewer than 4,000 of them had a net worth of over 8 million when they passed away. Ronald Reed was one of them. In his will, the former janitor left 2 million to his stepkids and more than 6 million to his local hospital and library. Those who knew Reed were baffled. Where did he get all that money? Well, it turned out that there was no secret. There was no lottery win and no inheritance. Reed saved what little he could and invested it into blue chip stocks. Then he waited for decades on end as tiny savings compounded into more than $8 million. And that's it. From janitor to philanthropist. A few months before Ronald Reed died, another man named Richard was in the news. Richard Foscone was everything Ronald Reed was not. A Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive with an MBA, Foscone had such a successful career in finance that he retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist. Former Merrill CEO David Komansky praised Foscone's business-savvy leadership skills, sound judgment, personal integrity. Crane's Business magazine once included him in the 40 under 40 list of successful business people. But then, like the gold coin skipping tech executive, everything fell apart. In the mid-2000s, Foscone borrowed heavily to expand an 18,000 square foot home in Greenwich, Connecticut that had 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 pools, 7 garages, and cost more than $90,000 a month to maintain. Then the 2008 financial crisis hit. The crisis hurt virtually everyone's finances. It apparently turned Foscone's into dust. High debt and illiquid assets left him bankrupt. I currently have no income, he allegedly told a bankruptcy judge in 2008. First, his Palm Beach house was foreclosed. In 2014, it was Greenwich Mansion's turn. 5 months before Ronald Reed left his fortune to charity. Richard Foscone's home, where guests recalled the thrill of dining and dancing atop a see-through covering on home's indoor swimming pool, was sold in a foreclosure auction for 75% less than an insurance company figured it was worth. Ronald Reed was patient. Richard Foscone was greedy. That's all it took to eclipse the massive education and experience gap between the two. The lesson here is not to be more like Ronald or less like Richard, though that's not bad advice. The fascinating thing about these two stories is that how unique they are to finance. In what other industry does someone not with no college degree, no training, no background, no formal experience, and no connections massively outperform someone with the best education, the best training, and the best connections. I struggle to think of any. It is impossible to think of the story of Ronald Reed performing a heart transplant better than a Harvard trained surgeon, or designing a skyscraper superior to the best trained architects. There will never be a story of a janitor outperforming the world's top nuclear engineers, but these stories do happen in investing. The fact that Ronald Reed can coexist with Richard Viscone has two explanations. One, financial outcome are driven by luck, independent. One, okay, let me reread this again. One, financial outcomes are driven by luck, independent of intelligence and effort. That's true to some extent, and this book will discuss it in further. Or two, and I think this is more common, the financial success is not a hard science. It's a soft skill where you have where how you behave is more important than what you know. I call this soft skill the psychology of money. The aim of this book is to use short stories to convince you that soft skills are more important than the technical side of money. And I'll do this in one way that will help everyone from Reed to Foscone and everyone in between make better financial decisions. These soft skills are, I've come to realize, greatly underappreciated. Finance is overwhelmingly taught as a math-based field where you put data into a formula and the formula tells you what to do, and it's assumed that you'll just go do it. This is true in personal finance, where you're told to have a 6-month emergency fund and save 10% of your salary. It's true in investing, where we know the exact historical correlation between interest rates and valuations. And it's true in corporate finance, where CFOs can measure the precise cost of capital. And it's not that any of these things are bad or wrong, is that knowing what to do tells you nothing about what happens in your head when you try to do it. Two topics impact everyone, whether you are interested in them or not: health and money. The healthcare industry is a triumph of modern science. With rising life expectancy across the world, scientific discoveries have replaced doctors' old ideas about how the human body works, and virtually everyone is healthier because of it. The money industry, investing, personal finance, business planning is another story. Finance has scooped up the smartest minds coming from top universities over the last 2 decades. Financial engineering was the most popular major in Princeton School of Engineering a decade ago. Is there any evidence it has made us better investors? Well, I have seen none. Through collective trial and error over the years, we learned how to become better farmers, skilled plumbers, advanced chemists, but has trial and error taught us to become better with our own personal finances? Are we less likely to bury ourselves in debt, more likely to save for a rainy day, prepare for retirement, have realistic views about what money does and doesn't do to our happiness? I've seen no compelling evidence, and most of the reasons why, I believe, is that we think about and are taught about money in ways that are too much like physics, with rules and laws, and not enough like psychology, with emotions and nuances. And that, to me, is as fascinating as it is important. Money is everywhere. It affects all of us. It confuses most of us. Everyone thinks about it a little differently. It offers lessons on things that apply to many areas of life, like risk, coincidence, and happiness. Few topics offer a more powerful magnifying glass that helps explain why people behave the way they do than money. It is one of the greatest shows on earth. My own appreciation for the psychology of money is shaped by more than a decade of writing on the topic, and I began writing about finance in the early 2008. It was the dawn of a financial crisis and the worst recession in 80 years. And to write about what was happening, I wanted to figure out what was happening. But the first thing that I learned after that financial crisis was that no one could accurately explain what happened or why it happened, let alone what should be done about it. For every good explanation there was, an equally convincing rebuttal was there. Engineers can determine the cause of a bridge collapse because there's agreement that if a certain amount of force is applied to a certain area, the area will break. Physics isn't controversial. It's guided by laws. Finance is different. It's guided by people's behaviors, and how I behave might make sense to me, but look crazy to you. The more I studied and wrote about the financial crisis, the more that I realized that you could understand it better through the lenses of psychology and history, not finance. And to grasp why people bury themselves in debt, you don't need to study interest rates. You need to study the history of greed, insecurity, and optimism. To get why investors sell out at the bottom of the bear market, you don't need to study the math or expected future returns. You need to think about the agony of looking at your family and wondering if your investments are imperiling your future. I love Voltaire's observation that history never repeats itself, man always does. It applies so well to how we behave with money. In 2008, I wrote a report outlining 20 of the most important flaws, biases, and causes of bad behavior I've seen affect people when dealing with money. It was called The Psychology of Money, and over 1 million people have read it. This book is a deeper dive into the topic. Some short passages from the report appear unaltered in this book. What you're holding is 20 chapters, each describing what I consider to be the most important and often counterintuitive features of psychology of money. And the chapters revolve around a common theme, but exist on their own and can be read independently. It's not a long book. You're welcome. Most readers don't finish the book they begin because most single topics don't require 300 pages to explain. I'd rather make 20 short points you finish than one long one you give up on. That's a good one. And I absolutely love the quality of this book. Like the cover, it's soft, it feels nice, and also the pages themselves are fantastic to highlight with, and that's always something that I love to feel when I'm like reading. It's like the feeling of, you know, the highlighter ink just soaking into these pages, so it really observes what I'm highlighting. I don't know how to explain it, but like it just feels really nice when like I highlight something and it just gives it a bit of a boost. And that was the introduction of this amazing book. I'm really excited to dive into chapter 1. I know that I mentioned that I'm gonna actually read all in one, but I'm actually going to split it up so it's easier to follow. So I'll see you in the next video where we cover chapter 1, the psychology of money. I'll talk to you soon.